Welcome to the Merseyside Development Update from Place Northwest. I'm Paul Unger, publisher of Place Northwest. I hope you've enjoyed some networking in the other room. Please do join in and get involved with today's event. Ask questions, make the most of the networking. When we're in that other section, do pop your cameras on and get around the tables. Just double click on tables to move around. Get more out of it. I'd like to thank our partners today, Lexington Communications, Torus, Pegasus, Rendell and Rittner and Curtains. Check out their areas in the other room, click on their logos and you can learn more about our sponsors today. Okay, we've got a great lineup of presenters and panelists for you this morning. To explore what's going on in the city region. There'll be two halves with a presentation and a panel in each half with networking in between. You can use the Q&A box to the right of the screen at any time to put your questions. I'll get to those during the panel discussions. If you haven't already done the Remo thing on this platform, I'd advise you to set up your profile. Only takes a couple of minutes just to find a pic, enter your details, and it greatly improves the experience. You can see the attendees in the participants list in this section, and then in the networking section, you can scroll through that list in the chat function, and you can search for names and message people. Things like that. So Merseyside Development Update. We're obviously in challenging times, but is that the case across all sectors and all boroughs? Today we'll find out. We're going to see what live projects are ongoing, where the opportunities are, and what the outlook is, hearing from developers, planners, architects, councils, and more. So let's get started. First up, we've got a presentation on a very interesting and exciting scheme that we'll hopefully see emerging soon. So I'll introduce Louise Sheridan from Ellis Williams Architects. If you pop your camera on, Louise. There we go. Perfect. Fire away. I'll see you afterwards.
Okay. Morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to share our journey with Safe Regeneration to create Destination Bootle. My presentation follows in some ways from the last Place Northwest Liverpool update, and some thoughts that Claire McColgan shared on the insight into the role of arts and culture and having a leading the way on community placemaking, the ability for arts to connect people with place, to rebuild confidence in identity and foster ownership. I guess this is akin really to the essence of the new planning white paper, which is quite topical. I'm sure we'll talk about it later, where there's a push to focus on placemaking and community involvement to create beautiful buildings and places in inverted commas. And I guess also the drive for energy efficiency and sustainable communities. So who are Safe? Safe established themselves in 2000 as an arts and social enterprise charity offering startup and business support to communities across Merseyside. About 10 years ago, they were commissioned to deliver a sculpture trail along the Leeds-Liverpool Canal and discovered the Bootle site and convinced Sefton Borough Council to allow them to use a vacant St Mary's Primary School building, which is now the heart of the Safe Community Hub. In 2018, they launched the highly popular Bootle Music Festival and showcasing local bands, local talent, artisan and community pop-ups. In 2019, they acquired the derelict former Little Merton pub on the periphery of their site, and they reopened it as the Lock and Key pub, as a not-for-profit social enterprise run by the community, serving beer brewed from their microbrewery within the Safe Hub, and showcasing again music and community user groups. You can see them here on Sutty's Ark, well known after the late great John Sutcliffe, who was a Safe trustee. And part of the process, they delivered a new vision called Destination Bootle, hashtag Destination Bootle, which was a vision really for Bootle. And part of that was to look at a community that was self-supporting and self-sustaining around principles of social value and maximising community benefit. So to create a thriving people where people want to settle and thrive. They work closely with Power to Change, Sefton Borough Council, Homes England and the Combined Authority and the Canals and Rivers Trust to bring this vision to fruition, and secured funding to develop detailed proposals for the site, which was to include homes, arts and enterprise facilities. Working closely with Sarah Lawton and the SIF team, the project was commissioned last year through the SIF framework, which obviously embeds social value and community value in all aspects of the project. Ellis Williams was successfully appointed in 2019 to lead the project, and we were delighted to do so. So a little bit about the site. The site itself is split in two places. The Carolina Wharf site, which was a former coal yard and has never been developed at all. And then the main Safe Hub site, which includes the St Mary's complex and the Lock and Key pub. The two sites are linked by a tunnel which was recently reopened through the Leeds, across the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, which links the two sites as it's split by the Mersey travel link up to Southport. It's very close to Bootle Town Centre. You can see the proximity to the Strand and also to the former St Mary's Church Gardens, which is a key community zone. But it's quite disjointed. From a public transport perspective and a sustainable transport perspective, this site is excellent. If it was in London, it would have a PTAL rating of about 6A, which would be the highest level. It's well covered by bus, rail, cycle routes, and is from a sustainable transport perspective is quite excellent. So how did we approach the site? It very much was hollowed out during the war, unfortunately, and the site itself was a mixture of disjointed housing developments, which had been pocket spaces infilled during the 60s, 70s and 80s. The main route of Bank Road, which linked to Merton Road to the south of the site, had completely been lost during the Blitz, with only a pedestrian footpath linking those spaces, which is well trodden, linking the wider community to Bootle Town Centre. We look to create these stronger vistas and routes across the site and replace the kind of lost accesses which had been wiped out during the war. We wanted to reconnect Safe to Bootle and Bootle to Safe. And to do that, we needed to create very strong north-south, east-west axes across the site. Maintaining existing trees and prioritising communal green spaces was absolutely vital for the vision of Safe. Outward reaching, so Safe was reaching out to the wider community and drawing it into Safe also. And then looking to reduce the dependence on the car. At the moment on the site and within Bootle, there is a very low car ownership, and so pushing the car to the periphery site was vital to create the spaces that we needed. We wanted to create equitable views and south-facing gardens, the ability for every dwelling to have a great view and a great aspect, not for some. So what was included within the project? It's a phased project over 4 phases, which includes at the Safe Hub, the relocation of the Safe Hub to free up the site, which includes a 3-storey art and enterprise space, offices, flexible workspaces, studio workshops, meeting spaces, 60-place nursery, a multi-purpose hall, canal side enterprise pods, and user facilities for canal boat owners, and also parking public realm. Phase 2 is the residential element, 41 2- and 3-bed dwellings and 2 to 3 stories, 66 1- and 2-bedroom apartments over 4 stories, and associated public amenity. Phase 3 is the pub and the social enterprise zone. This is remodelling and refurbishing of the existing Lock and Key pub, which is linked to a new catering facility, creating 13-bed B&B and relocating the microbrewery so it's associated directly with the pub. The phase 4, which is a hybrid application at the moment, is an 80-bed extra care facility, which includes community zones, including hair salon and cafe. The key to this project and the unique nature of this project is that it's the community elements that are being delivered first. And that includes, obviously, the arts hub and the zones around the arts hub. So how that played out in the master plan was quite important. We looked at an equitable balance of private amenity and public spaces vital to the ethos of safe. Orientation of buildings, maximising equitable views, spaces and high levels of southerly light all year around. The resi aspects were linked to the existing residential areas, creating strong routes from north to south, east to west. The apartments, a 4-storey gateway around blocks H and J indicated on the master plan, creating a strong bookend to the new Spine Road to link the existing Bank Road to Merton Road and to St Mary's Gardens beyond. And then the key element, how we interwove the arts elements throughout the whole site. And that was the concept of the pub to hub, with the pub indicated as K on the drawings, linking through a number of canal-size enterprise pods and workshops, which would act as pop-up bookable spaces that the community could hire, linked ultimately on Carolina Wharf to the new hub building with its nursery, offices and community facilities. Scale and the massing and the density of the space is also very important. It's a very low density development. The massing is a maximum of 4 stories. This was important again to the ethos of the scheme. The 4-storey apartment bookends and extra care the highest elements, and we carefully modelled all aspects of the scheme to ensure that we created great quality internal and external environments, making sure daylight reached into all housing and also all garden spaces. So the master plan itself, we wanted to create a cradle-to-grave community for everybody, where people could live, work, learn, settle and thrive. The opportunity for everybody within the community to have access to green spaces, not just private gardens. Promoting well-being, creating great vistas and unlocking the canal at the moment, which is very inaccessible. From this well-being, we look to seek to create activity, wet and dry, opening up more use on the canal, not just the canoe clubs and the scouts that use it linked to the hub. It's a great social investment in place. It's permeable and accessible to all. It offers homes for affordable rent and canal-sized pubs, as we mentioned, for community and pop-up enterprise. It's arts-led regeneration, I think, at its finest. And ultimately, the key thing for us, underpinning the social sustainability of the site, was looking at the actual energy sustainability on the site. Using photovoltaics in a central energy centre, which was looped ground source heating from a below-ground aquifer, we're able to aim to reduce fuel poverty by offering cheap electricity and heating to all properties and businesses. So just a few images, really, just to give a feel of the look and feel. This is the look to the Lock and Key pub. Most of you will know it. This is the social enterprise B&B and the microbrewery linked to the hospitality offer. The public plaza is currently the only route to the canal, and this has maintained the heritage assets enhanced. The extra care scheme, as you'll see on the right, is a hybrid application. It encloses the plaza, creates a community active space on the ground floor, including cafe and hair salon, inviting community participation and linking the extra care residents with the scheme. This mirrors the precinct on the opposite side of Merton Road to bolster the retail offer and create greater local amenity for the community. The gateway view, the western gateway to Merton Bank Road, is a set of apartments creating a wraparound gateway to the site, linking Bank Road and the town centre of Bootle beyond. It's pedestrian cycle access only, and it gives great passive supervision of the spaces. The balcony views on these aspects look towards the river and St Mary's Memorial Garden. The Bank Road to Merton Road is the eastern gateway spine. This is the key of the whole site and the focus. It's a green spine, maintains all the existing trees on site, some 123 trees. It has 3-bed townhouses on the right-hand side, you'll see here, with a split of both raised terraced and rear garden private amenity spaces tucked away, and cars are tucked away off site on a shared surface, giving a much more pedestrian-friendly feel. The Waverley Garden Court zone is the north-south link, creating strong links to the existing Waverley Street community. It links through down to the canal and creates a strong vista with all-day sunshine. It creates front gardens and to evoke a sense of community and participation between residents and non-residents. The pub-to-hub journey, the pods and the canal walk, we're looking to open up the canal. At the moment it's fenced off and quite private. We're maintaining the pub and vehicle and parking access around the canal to allow the general public to park close by. We're removing fencing and open up the landscape to the canal towpath to create stronger opportunities for community commercial activity and participation. Enhancement of biodiversity and well-being is vital to this area to create an environment of well-being. The bookable pods, as mentioned, for community events, pop-up cafes, water sport rental, are already in demand before we've even started putting a shovel into the ground. And finally, the route through the tunnel to the hub side on Carolina Wharf. This has opened Carolina Wharf up for the first time to new activity. It's maintaining heritage assets, pontoons for water sports and easy access to the canal, opportunities for electric boats to shuttle into Liverpool city centre and to Bootle city centre, also to Bramley Moor Dock, I believe, for the Evertonians out there. Great ground floor community cafe, 60-place nursery, which the YMCA are very keen to take and run. A business reception for businesses located within the building. And then on the first floor, multi-purpose hall for community groups, including scouts, dance and fitness classes, art studios and workshops, lettable meeting spaces, office spaces and community enterprise spaces, a true hub. And within that then providing quality agile facilities to enable SAFE to grow and widen community participation and generate social investment in what is Destination Bootle. And hopefully that's 15 minutes. Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. Wonderful. I love the look of that project, and I look forward to seeing that come out of the ground, hopefully in the months and years to come. We hear a lot about wanting more interesting design, and that's a really good example of what can be done with willing stakeholders and a bit of imagination. If I could ask our first panellists to turn your cameras on, please. We'll get underway with the first session. Hi, Lisa, Darren and Nick. We'll do a quick round of introductions. Just say your name, where you're from, what you do. I'll start with Darren first.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I joined Pegasus's Liverpool office as a principal planner in the summer after about 3.5 years at Cass Associates. Prior to that, I worked client side in onshore wind and housing. As a team, our projects span across England, Scotland, Wales and the Isle of Man. The wider Pegasus team also operates in Ireland. An office recently opening in Dublin. Outside of Pegasus, I'm a member of the task group for Planning Aid England, taken over as chair in January. I'm co-founder of the North West Neighbourhood Planning Network, and I've recently been elected to the Regional Activities Committee for the RTPI. And I'm also currently shortlisted for the RTPI North West Young Planner of the Year.
Very good. Lisa?
It's not very fair allowing me to follow that, is it, Paul?
No, gosh.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Harris. I'm the Exec Director of Place in St Helens Council. I've been in post only 6 months during the pandemic, which has been an exciting time, shall we say. And I'm really looking forward to working in St Helens and being back in the city region as well.
Very good. And Nick?
Hi, Nick Whiteman, Director at Redsun Projects. We're commercial property developers based in Liverpool, and Merseyside's very much our home patch, but operating across the wider Northwest and West Midlands region as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Louise, I just wanted to pick up on the sort of surroundings around that Destination Bootle site there. How does it link through to things like the Strand, which we've seen a lot about the plans there with Sefton and with the Landy. How does that sort of knit together into the centre?
I think there's wider discussions at the moment ongoing really with Sefton about the kind of wider Bootle master plan. In many ways, SAFE have started their journey sort of in advance of the redevelopment of the Strand, and obviously the Borough Council buying the Strand and taking it back into their kind of ownership. There is definitely a willingness by SAFE to look to reach into the Strand, and I know that that's something that they would welcome conversations, in detail conversations with. I think their journey at the moment is just ahead of where the Strand development is for present, but I know, for example, there are discussions this week on it with the council, but it's certainly something we feel that there are very strong possibilities for reaching into the Strand. As I say, it's 2 blocks away from the site, and there's great opportunity there, we think, for both sites to kind of create a very beneficial symbiosis.
Yeah. It's interesting seeing it all knit together. Nick, from a developer's perspective, just start by giving us a quick flavour of the live projects that you've got on.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually probably had our busiest year, which seems a little bit odd to say, considering the few months of chaos at the start of it. But we've probably completed about 250,000 square foot of industrial space this year throughout Merseyside. So the biggest single building we did was a 125,000 square foot building at Aviator, which is our scheme in Ellesmere Port, which is obviously just outside the Merseyside boundary, but not by much. And that was successfully let and sold a few months after completion. We've also completed 110,000 square foot of our third and final phase at Riverview Business Park on the Wirral. In Bromborough, that was 3 units, again, all sort of let and sold within months of completion. And then we're on site at the moment, again in Bromborough, with something called Magazine Point, 50,000 square foot sort of small unit scheme. And then we're working on a number of other things, Knowsley Hub in Knowsley on a site we've acquired from the council there, which again about 40 to 50,000 square foot small unit scheme, and a couple of others sort of further afield in sort of North Wales and West Midlands. So we're fairly thankful at the moment. We're focusing on industrial. Not sure I'd be.
Oh, as you've frozen.
For us, and the demand is still as strong as it's ever been. So it's been a really encouraging 12 months actually, despite what's going on, and we're fairly confident that should into next year as well. Yeah.
So just saying, occupiers faring fairly well.
Yeah.
Different sectors seem to have different prospects. Has there been a sort of profile pattern to those that are doing well in terms of occupiers or where the inquiries are coming from?
Yeah, I think our sort of bread and butter development is a sort of multi-unit scheme of what we consider to be fairly small units, so 10 to say 50,000 square foot. What we've always found is that the majority of demand for that is from owner-occupiers. So it's businesses that have been doing relatively well, over the last 5 or 10 years. They're sort of fed up of paying rent to whoever their landlord is, and they want to own their own property and move forward like that. So that certainly hasn't changed. We're still finding the vast majority of inquiries that we get are from businesses that want to own their own property, which is difficult for them to do because most new build industrial development in the region is from the sort of investment houses or the bigger investors who are trying to generate an income stream. They want to rent them, they don't want to sell. So we've sort of managed to develop a bit of a niche in the sense that we will sell completed buildings where others don't. So we're still finding the demand's pretty strong there. Where you had the more sort of corporate entities who will take leases, there was certainly a few months where that went quiet earlier in the year, where people were taking stock, seeing how things were going to pan out. But that seems to be picking up again a bit at the moment. So the demand profile we saw 12, 18 months ago hasn't really changed now. It's still strong.
Yeah, it's just very, very interesting to hear that that there is still activity going on, despite some of the sort of doom and gloom that you see in some of the national headlines.
I mean, some of the businesses we've worked with have. We had a couple of calls, within weeks of the lockdown early this year, where people were putting deals on hold, and it's elements of panic stations from some people. But then the phone would be picked up a month or so later, and they were actually explaining they had their busiest quarter on record. Your packaging companies and logistics and online retail and people linked with the food and drink manufacturing industry, all of those guys actually probably had some of them had their busiest year. So there's definitely winners and losers, across the economy at the moment. And while industrial development doesn't operate in complete isolation, it's certainly an area where the demand is as strong as it's ever been. Yeah,
absolutely. And Lisa, given you've one of those people that's gone through the odd experience of starting a job during the pandemic, tell us about your sort of priorities as they're emerging in post now for St Helens.
I think building on what Nick said, I think it's really important for us to make sure that we are well ready for the market readjustment, and as the market readjusts, having those products available in order to respond to the market. So one of the things that we think is a real opportunity in St Helens is about green. And how we kind of adapt and using this opportunity of the pandemic and this change of how we do business, how we're going to use that and capitalise that and to grow back greener. And a great example of that is the funding that we've secured both from government, the Combined Authority and ourselves as a council to deliver our Glass Futures, which is a research and development unique to the actual to the globe. It's global collaboration in the glass industry in order to trial and develop green manufacturing processes. So we think that's a real niche market and something that in St Helens, with our history and our heritage, we really think is it's really bringing that innovation back to where it all started in the first place. So it's the next industrial revolution in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing projects we've covered on Place Northwest recently with the extra funding announcements. Does that have spin-offs then for wider development, do you think, around that site?
Yeah, what's really interesting is that model is, whilst that we've been developing that for the glass industry, very much that model can actually be replicated for many other industries, and we're in early discussions at the moment with the steel industry as well, and how can we co-locate that research and development for those foundation type industries on that site, and we've got an opportunity to grow that as a innovation park. And that's something that we will be, master planning and bringing forward very, very soon. So, we're really interested to have people's feedback on that kind of an opportunity, both from industry but also from the development sector.
Yeah. It'd be fascinating to see what opportunities there are for other people to get involved on maybe other sites around there.
Yeah, a key one for us is that glass feature actually links very well into our town centre, and we're working on our town deal at the moment. And I think it goes back to what Louise was mentioning about having culturally centred. So, you know, I think gone are the days where you have silos of industry, you know, culture, community, and retail maybe. You know, I think now it's about how do we place, shape and create places that people can choose to access a whole range of opportunities and access that as well in a sustainable way. So our town centre will very much link by a green path and a park to the Glass Futures opportunity. And we think that's really exciting, because I think that brings that heritage, that innovation culturally, and actually looking to the future together as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a moment, isn't there, right now when the timing is right and people have maybe reassessed their values during 2020 as well, around green corridors, etc. Darren, we've heard mention of the planning white paper already. Do you think that will have implications for the local market?
Yes, certainly. Certainly with regards to housing and housing numbers, I think the main implication for the north is the alterations to the standard method, which is obviously the way that housing need for each local authority is calculated. Nationally, the target's increased to 337,000 new homes, which is an increase of 73,000 a year. Unfortunately for the north, the current proposed revised standard method produces a low figure of just 44,000 new homes a year, which, it doesn't, up from 44,000 to 50,000. But the delivery for the north is 60,000 a year at present. So the target's actually lower than what's being delivered at the moment. So what Pegasus is doing is trying to promote amendments to the standard method to achieve that levelling up for the north that is frequently discussed by politicians.
Yeah, and in terms of the pipeline of projects that you're seeing clients interested in discussing at the moment, are there ones that are particularly hotter than others?
Certainly strong demand for residential across the Merseyside authorities. You've got either planning applications or representations submitted for well over 1,000 homes across Merseyside in every local authority. We did see a very small dip in student housing, probably back at April, May time, but that's picked up again now. Certainly a lot of interest in the moment in the Wirral local plan and upcoming Reg 19 consultation. Affordable housing is another strong sector across Merseyside. We're seeing a lot of registered providers that have access to Homes England grants that are very hungry for land at the moment. So yeah, we're working with them. In Liverpool, the hotel market is still quite strong despite the impacts on the hospitality industry. Obviously, people are thinking about the pipeline and that, from conception to delivery. And everyone's hoping that certainly by the time that anything would be through planning and actually being delivered, then the coronavirus would be behind us.
Yeah, absolutely. Tourism so important to the whole city region. Louise, you were nodding along at some bits of that. And as an architect at the sort of similar to planning, the start of projects, what are you seeing in terms of which sectors are still showing signs of life?
I think Ellis Williams, obviously, we were founded really on the bedrock of education, and that's been a tricky sector for the last couple of years, particularly further education, more than any of the sectors. I think, from the noises that are coming out of the DFE at the moment, there is a strong pipeline of schools work which should be announced shortly in the autumn statement. I think the previous announcement that Boris has made, over £1 billion worth of funding, was a bit of a smoke smoke and mirrors number where, most of that work was already committed. In fact, when we saw the lists as a practice, we were already working on some of the schools. So that was a bit of a surprise. There will be investment in education without a doubt. I think the other areas where we're finding strength, I know we've talked about housing, certainly affordable housing is something, and extra care that we are looking increasingly more to work within. And also the leisure aspects, surprisingly, are standing up very strong. We're looking obviously at leisure centres at the moment in Halton, Cheshire West and Chester, and a number of the regions in the north are investing obviously on the back of COVID and seeing that there is a wellbeing and health crisis on its way to invest in their leisure estate, which is kind of is good to see. I think also from an education sector, obviously there's from the further and higher, we're keen to get Maritime Knowledge Hub up and running. There's been lots of noises about that in the press recently, and that looks finally to be on the move. It's taken a bit of time to get the funding aligned. I think retail obviously is still poor, but I think as Nick's just mentioned, where we are finding strength, strangely enough, is the logistics type of work. Our Berlin office in particular is doing an awful lot of work at the moment for the likes of Amazon, Facebook, the ubiquitous Epic Games, owners of Fortnite. So there's a lot of expansion, certainly on the continent, that we're benefiting from. And also, I guess, blue light sector is another sector that we're very busy in, obviously on the back of COVID. We're working very closely with Merseyside Police at the moment as well. So it's a mixed bag, really. The arts sector in particular has always been a strong sector for Ellis Williams. And again, it's almost non-existent with the current, obviously, difficulties within that zone. And obviously cinemas also have been a strong sector for us. Again, having enormous challenges around sort of the delivery of COVID. So we are seeing sort of sparks of light at the end of the tunnel, but there's a lot riding really on the government's announcements, I think, certainly for the public sector, with funding within the autumn statements to really get things kick-started.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to come back on to sustainability, which has been raised a couple of times. It's been a recurring theme, quite rightly so, throughout all our events this year. That always comes up. And Nick, as a developer working in industrial, we hear a lot about energy, reusing of materials, circular construction, some of these new sort of phrases. Do you have a view on the whole sort of sustainability agenda?
Yeah, it's important for occupiers, just in the simple sense that they want, an energy efficient building. So they want something that's going to be, low energy bills. They want electrical vehicle charging points out the front. That's becoming very popular. What they're not particularly bothered about is the badging of it or the certification. So BREEAM's obviously been a very popular one, particularly amongst the public sector for many years, where if you're acquiring land or acquiring funding from the public sector, you're often required to go through a BREEAM certification process. I'm very sceptical about the value of that. In the many years we've been putting buildings up, we've never once had an occupier inquire as to whether it's BREEAM certified. But it's good for consultants. It generates there's a lot of reports need producing, a lot of work to get your BREEAM certification. But I'm very sceptical as to really what the real life value of that is. Does it make our buildings any more valuable? I don't think it does. Do occupiers benefit from it? I think not. So I think planning and building regs gets a raw deal with a lot of discussions, but I think actually the building regs regime and the planning regime is already pretty good at ensuring that buildings and developments are pretty soundly done from an energy efficiency or sustainability perspective. I mean, certainly just the amount of insulation that goes in the buildings we're putting up at the moment is significantly higher than it was, say, 10 years ago. So if you're in a new build industrial building now, compared to something that was built 10, 15 years ago, it's a significantly different product. obviously there's some, there's a lot talked about net carbon zero, I think, at the moment has been, the next thing. Again, I'll, have a slight dose of skepticism on that. I mean, construction's inherently, it's concrete, glass, steel. It's, it's going to be poor for the environment. There's not really a lot you can do about that. But as long as, I think it's all about making sure the buildings work for the occupiers. But whatever badge or branding you put on it, I think. I understand the industry needs these things to have a sort of uniformity when the people are understanding what it's about. But I've got a degree of skepticism on the way it's approached.
Yeah, nothing wrong with a bit of skepticism. We like that. What does it?
Not to say I'm going to go on a climate change denial.
No. What does it do to margins as those the building regs and the sort of passive house principles become more mainstream? Does it erode, and how do you cope with that?
Yeah, I mean, in respect to building regs, you just have to cope because to put up a building, you have to get building regs for it. So when there's a change come in every few years, we, you need to get our heads around where's the real cost implications going to be there. I mean, insulating the buildings was one of the bigger ones in the last changes. In terms of things like BREEAM, if you're employing that, it does add a chunk of cost on. It is predominantly consultant cost rather than construction costs it adds, but it's more it's the sort of the process you have to go through and the time it takes and the attention it diverts from getting on with the things like your planning applications, and it's more it's a diversion of attention, I think, is the sort of main issue we have with it, when if it feels like it's not really to any benefit other than it's just something you have to do to suit your funders or the people you're buying the land from.
Management time, which is precious at the best of times. And Lisa, apart from the Glass Futures project, tell us about some of the other sort of projects that you've got on your desk at the moment that we might look forward to progress in 21.
Well, I mean, we've got lots of small projects that are actually on site now and building, and as Nick said, I mean, the market is still actually, there's still demand out there, so the smaller projects for those kind of more small units are going well. I think we're looking to the future, having arrived recently, my view is that we absolutely need to get our large schemes from being talked about to actually being delivered, so I'm quite passionate about getting things delivered. So I think we've got some significant housing sites, Moss Nook in St Helens with Taylor Wimpey and Harworth. We're kind of going well with that. They've just secured some brownfield land funding, so we very much see that will come forward very soon. We've got Cowley. We're working with Torus, one of your sponsors, and with BXB and the combined authority to bring that forward, that site, which is a real game changer really for our housing market in St Helens. So how can we use a site of that size to do something different, to really play shape in St Helens? I think it's really, really exciting. And also, how can we trial and some of these modern methods of construction? How do we get them from being talked about to actually being on site and delivered? And I think that's where the public sector help and support can really bring things to life. And I suppose the other one is at Parkside. We really want to bring Parkside forward, and we're going to put our absolute best case forward to the planning inspector about the need, and that logistics market is absolutely it's changed phenomenally, as in the demand has gone through the roof. So we want to be well positioned in Parkside in order to make that happen, both for the road logistics, but also as exciting from rail freight logistics as well. Brexit brings with it new challenges. Our connections to the port will be absolutely fundamental to making that come forward. So I would say we've got some amazing large scale opportunities in St Helens that we will I think light a fire under, I think it would be intended to say, and get them moving very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting. Darren, I'll put this question to you. So a question from Paul Eaton at Clearfire, but does the panel know if there's any legal requirement from a planning perspective for electric vehicle charging points to be part of the application or stage 3 design? Any details around that you can share?
As far as legal requirements, probably not qualified to comment, but certainly from a planning point of view, I know certain local authorities within Merseyside do have planning policies that require electric vehicle charging points for new residential developments. And unfortunately, they do tend to be one of the first things to go when viability is questioned on a scheme. And I think that's something that, as an industry, we could probably work on a little harder to try to tighten up those requirements, maybe through including them as building regulations rather than planning policies. But yeah, certainly it depends on different local authorities.
Yeah. Louise, have you got experience of putting EV points in?
Yeah, in fact, we're putting them into our office as we speak. But I think part of that is that we'll see, I think, a much cheaper solution for EV moving forwards. You know, it's becoming a much stronger market. I know that EDF have just taken over Pod Point, and we should be looking at, you know, cheaper solutions to daisy chain, electric vehicle charging, and to make it more accessible for people to use. Certainly the likes of Merseyside Police, one of our clients, are looking to move fleet cars to electric, and that's something that certainly I think we're seeing a large move towards the likes of Amazon as well, who are working with moving fleets to electric, and that will push electric vehicle charging requirements, and obviously the demand for electric vehicle points within, you know, city centres. Within the SAFE scheme, we've allowed for, there's plenty of electrical vehicle clubs and hire rental like Enterprise that have leapt onto that now. Within SAFE, we're looking at a permanent set of 5 electric vehicles for the community to book as and when they need them, to move them away from the need to actually own a car, but to have access to a car when they need a car. And I think that will be a massive change. Most of us are probably sitting here with cars on the driveway that haven't moved pretty much for 7-8 months, and people are now starting to question, do I actually need to have the expense of 1-2 cars sitting on my driveway when actually I'm working from home, you know, the majority of the time? Certainly as a company, we're looking to balance that travel and working from home now, and make it company policy moving forwards. And I think a lot of companies have seen the benefits of that during lockdown, and it's been a real positive, certainly from an environmental perspective.
Yeah. And
yeah, Paul, just to
please.
come in on that, actually, with EV charging points, often, you know, developers aren't in the business of, you know, necessarily putting more in than they need to in terms of planning requirements, but we're putting them in as standard now on everything we do. I think sometimes planning policy can be a little bit slow to catch up, so depending on the local authority area, there may be a requirement to put the infrastructure in rather than the charging points, which is basically just ducting in the ground. But it's definitely something we think is going to be attractive to occupiers, and is going, you know, it's only going to get more of a plus point on buildings. So I think in a few years' time, if you're looking at any commercial building, whether it's office or industrial, if there aren't any electrical vehicle charging points there, it's going to look very unusual indeed. So, you know, it's something we are doing as standard, but the knock-on effect of that also is on the energy capacity in the network. So the energy requirements developments like ours used to have are only going to increase, and when you get the likes of Amazon and some of the third-party logistics guys, if they suddenly put their whole fleet of vehicles on electrical vehicles, it's really going to potentially cause issues down the line in terms of, you know, viability of schemes if there's enough power in the network.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen from stories that we've done on Place Tech, on our sister publication covering real estate sort of innovation. There's a lot of public funding from Innovate UK and Department for Transport for pilot projects around EV. So I'm sure there are opportunities to get involved with companies like Connected Curb that we've covered, and some local authorities getting involved in those as well, the likes of Leeds doing infrastructure sort of pilots. A similar sort of area, the next question from Steph Ramsden, also touching on energy. Ellesmere Port at the boundary, if you like, of Merseyside, will be the centre for innovation on the hydrogen economy with the announcement of funding for HyNet. How do the panel see innovations like this influencing future opportunities? I mean, Hellesmere Port, obviously the home of Vauxhall Astra, and we know about the automobile supply chain all around Merseyside, and obviously linking in with Halewood as well, and Jaguar Land Rover. Could we see a similar flourishing of a supply chain around hydrogen, which seems to be mentioned a lot the last year or two, and there's a Northwest Hydrogen Cluster, etc. Darren, have you seen any inquiries around that sort of area?
Certainly the inquiries for renewables in general across the Northwest and particularly Merseyside, yes. Yeah. I think as for hydrogen, it's a very niche, and I've not come across it other than in Ellesmere Port in Merseyside. But yeah, I'd say that certainly what's going on in Wirral with offshore wind, and Liverpool with the ground source heat pump network, and of course the Ellesmere Port project. I think it is very good for the region, and I think it's something that will benefit us all. Okay.
Lisa, do you want to come back in there?
Yeah, I mean, given that I've just come from Cheshire West, it's great to hear that they've been successful and secured that funding. And I think it goes back to one of the other speakers saying about, sometimes the systems can be slow in the uptake. We've been talking about charging points for how long? It's really now that the market is making us all respond quicker. I have one fitted in my own home in the next couple of weeks, to be perfectly honest. But I think in the hydrogen world, it is about how do we get real innovation into manufacturing processes as well, and how do we get ahead of these opportunities, and how do we start thinking about future-proofing our developments as well. So things are going to start moving, I think, at a pace. 2050, 2040, the net zero carbon. It kind of is that driving force, but the big one, and Nick mentioned it, it is the cost, and businesses are making those decisions based on cost. So I think the Northwest and HyNet is absolutely a fantastic opportunity to put us on the national and again global world. We've got our geology in this area, our innovation in this area. Really means that if we put our minds to it, we can really start to knit these things together. And be leaders in creating new sustainable development.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, is this something you've been tracking at all, the whole hydrogen market?
Yeah, and I mean, I know very little about the technology, so I couldn't really say much about it from that point of view. But I suppose it's obviously something that's interesting if it's going to produce a sector that has knock-on effects to supply chains and jobs and that kind of thing. I mean, the thing that would be of greater interest to us is it going to improve the available power in the local area, and the energy sort of infrastructure industry is a bit of a it's like the Wild West in terms of how you actually go about getting your connections, and ultimately occupiers want to know that when they flick the light switch on, that they've got a steady connection to the local grid. So innovation is important, but occupiers still want an absolutely robust connection to the grid. So it will be great if it produces more energy to assist developments and manufacturers, but the actual technology itself, I'm a bit ignorant to. I'm afraid.
I won't test you on your blue hydrogen and all the different types. It's very complex science, but we don't always have to understand how it works as long as it does. Louise, maybe this next one for you, given the sort of changing values that we're seeing in society now around connectivity and active travel, things like that. A question from Terry Nolan. After seeing high-profile cycle lane rollout, are you aware of other transport options to enable safe and efficient travel around the region?
It's interesting, actually. My husband was in Dublin recently, and Dublin have actually halved most of their road space and created an incredible cycle network, far more ambitious, I think, than we've seen, certainly in the Northwest. And it's had a huge benefit, I think, for access to the city centre. You know, Dublin's been choked by traffic issues for a long time, and I think it's been a real opportunity. And it'd be a shame, I think, if we don't take this opportunity now and try and build on sort of the aspects of that. I mean, anecdotally, walking around Liverpool, we're doing a walking challenge at the moment. We're actually raising money and walking to our Berlin office, so I'm actually pounding the streets quite a lot to try and do 2,000 miles as a team. And one of the noticeable things is the amount of electric bikes that are now on the road, and I think that, again, coupled with people being more active in lockdown because they've got the time, because they're based at home, I think is a huge benefit. I think looking at sustainable transport is really important. I think, you know, that last mile from the station discussion that we've had, you know, on a number of occasions. I know that sort of the Knowledge Quarter has been kind of banging the drum for that for some time, is really important. And it is that you've got to be able to give people a viable alternative that they're comfortable with, to actually get out on a rainy day and jump on a bike and cycle into town and not feel that, you know, that they're taking their life in their hands by doing that. I think some of the work that's been done around Liverpool, certainly from where I'm based, has been really good, and it's great to see a lot more families looking to kind of get out on bikes and to walk into work rather than that. And I think we just need to see a better kind of rollout of that, and also maybe just more protection for it. One of the difficulties we do have when we talk about reducing car parking on housing developments, there's always a healthy scepticism that you know, that is just for the benefit of the development, and it means that we're saving money and putting money into our back pocket. But I think it's time that we need to really invest in sustainable communities and ask the question, you know, what is it that we want that, you know, the development to do? It's all very well saying, yes, it's a sustainable community, but then all of a sudden we're piling cars all over the properties. We've got to encourage people to look to alternative and to create, you know, meaningful development around public transport hubs, just like SAFE, to make sure that there are viable alternatives and not everybody has to be dependent on owning cars, which ultimately during COVID are sitting redundant on people's driveways.
Yeah, absolutely well said. Anybody else want to come in there? Yeah, Lisa.
Paul, you know, we're going to see the release of tranche 2 of the green travel funding. I think tranche 1, the delivery timescales kind of meant that it was superficial, and I'm really excited that tranche 2 should allow us to much more make a step change. I think the key to that, though, and a key learning part of that, is about that community engagement and listening to people and about what journeys people want to make. So a key to that, as Louise mentioned, is that connectivity between modes of transport and that last mile. I think is really key, and making sure we get those connections right and those green travel corridors really right. But a key to tranche 2 is going to be about us actually listening to communities and people taking part in that. So, you know, I would encourage everybody, wherever you live or wherever you work, you know, please get involved in that, because I think we need that wealth of voice and expertise in order to shape the next phase. Yeah,
absolutely. And a different sort of connectivity, but is there enough, a question from Dave Ferry, is there enough access to full fibre internet connectivity across the city region? And does this pose any sort of challenge to regeneration? Anyone got views on the whole sort of broadband debate?
We've just done a bit of a study on our development sites and their connectivity, and I think it's fair enough to say, in this new digital world, with all of us saying we've locked out or whatever, we've all noticed connectivity more than ever. So we know that it's not good enough at the moment. We know it's an area that needs investment and development. I think the city region super spine, which will be coming forward, will really help us to be the bit that starts to unlock that. But I think it is down to councils and developers to work together, to also lever in some private sector funding in this area as well. And I know the market is quite lively in this area. And Nick mentioned the market in relation to electricity and power, and I think digital connectivity is going to be as important now more than ever for all businesses. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our site, our new site in particular, have that built in from the beginning.
Yeah. And Darren, is that something that you've seen become a sort of key factor in the early stage of projects when you're working on planning with developers?
It's certainly something that comes up, but it's probably less of a planning concern and more of an infrastructure issue that is fleshed out long before it reaches the point of the planning submission.
Yeah. It's the first question now, according to the letting agents. What's the connectivity when you go in? It used to be about loos and views, as I was taught, sold buildings, but now it's get the phone out, look at the Wi-Fi. Nick, I mean, that must be something that you're familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it said some people would rather the water get cut off than the internet at home. But it's interesting because from a developer's point of view, you're obviously required to make sure there's water to a building. You don't necessarily need gas, and power, and they're the things you need to formally complete a building, sign it off, and hand it over. And connectivity is seen very much as an occupier-specific requirement. So. Often with our developments and agreements with occupiers, you're required to ensure that there's infrastructure at the site boundary, and then it's sort of over to you, occupier. So, to be honest, we don't often hear if there's major connectivity problems. It's often something the occupiers will perhaps find 6 months, 12 months into operating. But I suspect over the next few years it's going to be that as important as getting the water on, in that it will be passed over to the developer as being something that they're responsible for delivering, because people aren't going to want to take buildings that haven't got the appropriate level of connectivity.
And I know from speaking to some of the internet service providers, they would like to see it classed as a utility. For the same sorts of reasons, really. Final question before we break. Do council parking standards? This is a question from Dave Schumacher. Do council parking standards need to be amended? Picking back up on this connectivity, sort of sustainable transport debate, to encourage less car ownership and therefore the use of sustainable transport. There's a wry smile, Louise. Do you want to?
Thanks, Dave. Dave's working on SAFE with us, so I know where that question's come from. I think just touching on that, there are targets that are set which kind of blanket across an authority. They don't necessarily take into account, the urban areas where there probably is less car ownership and the more rural areas. And I don't think there's a one size fits all approach. Most of the areas within the combined region have a mix of urban and rural. And as we know, the challenges to not providing, to providing sort of services to the more rural areas are a challenge, and I think it's difficult to say to somebody, well, you can't own a car and live in this area. So I think there needs to be a much more joined up approach to the sites themselves, and that's, I think, a challenge. When you look at the sort of blanket approach that the new government white paper is looking to bring in on planning, to how we look at the nuances of different areas within an authority. It's certainly something, I think, when you look at the car ownership statistics for say Sefton, they'd be far greater in Southport than they would be in Bootle Town Centre. Yet we have to provide the same amount of parking spaces, and I think that's a real challenge moving forwards. I think it's the same in every authority, and often it's seen when it's challenged that you're trying to just save money on a scheme and put it into your back pocket. I think really it's starting to look at a much more joined up approach to what can you offer as an alternative to the car on the site, and building housing developments in kind of that are not near transport hubs that don't offer people an alternative just doesn't feel right to me.
Lisa, will you be reviewing car parking standards around the borough?
Well, we've just submitted our local plan to the Secretary of State, so that the parking standards and sustainable travel options are in there. I think just doing one alone, just relaxing standards, is not the answer. It has to be a package of measures. It has to be the system joining up if we're to actually address this issue. So just providing less parking spaces just means that your streets get clogged up. And then, we've completely then, lost our issue over quality development and quality places. So it's about how do we get the car, the sustainable transport, the public transport, and then how do we listen to what people want all at the same time? And if we can crack that one, we'll probably do the best development in the world of the Carling development, isn't it? Yeah. So, I think it's not just about regulation and counting numbers, as Louise says, it's about horses for courses and creating great places, really.
Yeah. And just before we finish, Darren, do you want to give a quick plug to Planning Aid and how that can help with under-resourced projects?
Yes, absolutely. So Planning Aid in the Northwest, it's the charity arm of the Royal Planning Institute, and we are offering services of chartered planners who are members of our volunteer network to assist local authorities with any consultations, whether they be in person or virtual, and any charity groups out there who otherwise can't necessarily afford to have themselves represented by planning consultants. And so across Merseyside at the moment, we're working with several charity groups in Wirral to form responses to the Wirral local plan. I'm currently preparing an application for the Merseyside Domestic Violence Service. We're looking to open a cafe in the Baltic Triangle. So these are the types of places that we can really offer some voluntary assistance. And also, if any planners out there want to volunteer, it's certainly a great opportunity to get involved in some stuff that might be a bit different from the usual day-to-day work. And it's all available on the RTPI website.
Wonderful, and they can contact you or chat with you.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
During the event. No, that's valuable work. Really, really good. Thanks, everyone. We'll draw that to a close there. A virtual round of applause at home to our speakers. That was brilliant. Thank you. Please stay on now for the networking break. We'll pop over into there in a second, and we'll come back in about 15 minutes time at 11:25. Do pop your cameras on, don't be shy, dive in, you might even enjoy it. I'll see you in the other room. Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. Welcome back to the main stage. I hope you enjoyed some networking in the other room. There'll be plenty of time later on for some more of that as well. We've got the second panel coming up in a bit. And next up, I'm delighted to invite somebody who's passionate about placemaking and is going to give us a specialist developer's point of view, Kate Ellison from Torus. Kate, if you just pop your camera on.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so thanks a lot for inviting me to speak today. As Paul said, I'm going to try and give a slightly different take on the housing market at the moment and focus on how it's affecting RPs and their role in the kind of building back better agenda. So just to start, I thought it was worth giving an introduction on the Torus group and our kind of operating model, really. So as you can see there, that kind of diagram, we are made up of a kind of core business, which is the landlord, and that's the Great Homes. And then we've got a number of subsidiaries. So we've got the commercial contracting, which is HMS, and they are our repairs and maintenance contractor, and more recently and more so now starting to build commercial contracting for our new builds. We've then got our ambitious developments, which is essentially Torus Developments, which is the subsidiary that develops out on behalf of the landlord, and that's what I'm part of. And then you've got our communities, and that's essentially our foundations, which is our charity, Foundations run the Fire Fit Hub in South Liverpool, Toxteth, which is a youth zone, and they do a lot of community outreach work around, deprivation and poverty, improving lives, just making sure, that the community is being supported where it's needed. So then, more specifically, Torus as a developer, who we are, what we do and where we do it, really, just a quick summary. So we're the largest developing housing association in the Northwest. Our activity is focused around our three heartlands, which is Warrington, St Helens and Liverpool. But we are operational in 10 local authority areas. So we go as far as just south of Preston, which you can see on that map there. And then we're right up to the boundary with kind of Greater Manchester as for Cheshire East and Macclesfield. So at the moment we've got, and this is at any given point really, we've got 35 active sites, which roughly equates to around 1,900 units. And at any given time we've got a pipeline of kind of 2,000 plus units. So our offer is pretty diverse. We deliver all tenures, so everything from social rent, affordable rent, shared ownership, rent to buy, extra care, private rent and outright sale. We're investing circa 1 billion in delivering that kind of ambitious programme over the next 5 years. I think our target was to deliver 5,000 plus homes, but we will be closer to the 6,000 point. And we are a strategic partner with Homes England, which has brought Torus 67 million in extra grant funds and allowed us to increase our delivery by 29%. So as an organisation, our ethos is around, kind of a focus on land-led development, so that we're really making the impact we're controlling what we're developing and creating the impact we want to create within our communities. So I mentioned our three heartlands. So there's a lot of regeneration projects and placemaking going on within them areas, and we're seeing development as a key part, but not the only part of that. Obviously, post-COVID, all of them issues are becoming more important. And then just a little kind of overview of the type of products we're developing and the diversity of our programme. So I'm sure everyone will have seen the signage for at least one of these sites. But really diverse offer there in terms of, a 200 unit rent to buy scheme in Lightbody Street, which is part of the 10th Street regeneration area. Edge Lane, the approach, the development as you come into the city centre from the M62, and then you've got Allerton Fire Station, which is retaining some of the existing buildings as well to create a mixed tenure development. So now the kind of the sales pitch, the bit about Torus is over. Thought just to kind of set the context of the presentation, it was worth touching on the role of RPs in the market and then explaining, how that might change going forward. So I think, we've heard from Louise and the panel around all the different elements really that are, part of the economic recovery of the city region and, the importance of education in that picture and commercial and everything else. I think I'll be focusing more on the housing as a specific element, but obviously there's lots of linkages in with other elements covered in other presentations. So just to give an overview of that role on the collective really across the Liverpool City region, Torus are part of and chair a group of developing of the largest 13 of the largest developing RPs. And that group was kind of brought together just so we could be a bit more strategic about what we do and collaborate and, kind of share information, share pipelines and take a more strategic view as a whole on what we're developing. So across the 13 largest developing RPs that we're working with at the moment, we are collectively on site with, over 4,000 units. And that's roughly 111 schemes, and there's a further 7,000 units in the pipeline. I think, essentially the role of RPs in delivering housing supply is massive. We account for a third of everything being delivered at the moment. So really important role, and our core purpose differs to others who are delivering housing in that our core purpose is to deliver housing for those most in need, and that's often very vulnerable groups within society. So The below is just a breakdown of the Torus programme at the moment in terms of the tenure split, but actually I would say that's pretty typical of any developing RP. So affordable rent is, very much our key target, our key product really, our core business. At the moment, that accounts for around 60% of the programme, and that includes quite a lot of kinds of extra care accommodation and specialist accommodation that is also for affordable rent. And then quite a big element of our programme is shared ownership and rent to buy. And then a really small element really is, PRS and outright sale offer. And we mainly look to deliver that where it adds to the housing offer that we're trying to create on one site. So it's much more about creating the right mix of community than it is the kind of developing high-end homes for profit. So just to touch on how RPs have been affected by COVID, obviously some of the short-term impacts are well known across the sector. As mentioned then, the scale of site schemes on sites across them 13 developing RPs was drastically reduced. We went down to 38 sites remaining open during the lockdown period from 111. And I think, Torus itself, out of its 35 sites, was only active with around 2. So I think that number's quite promising, actually. And then that, that 4,100 number was reduced to almost just over a quarter, really. So massive impact on activity, and obviously this all impacts at the other end of the line where it's less housing outputs into the market. So we did a piece of work to capture just what some of their major impacts were, and we concluded that while the average period of a site closure was 13 weeks, the average impact to projects was actually a 5-month delay. And I think we're still understanding the longer term impacts and the different working practices and everything else, and we are expecting that to affect programmes longer term. And again, the expected recovery, while it was a really short period of closure, really, the impacts have extended much beyond that period into the next 2 financial years, really. And ultimately, the impact on spend and investments, which is, massively significant, was 30% reduced. I think the Torus programme went from about £205 million forecast spend to 107. So our impact was much greater, and that was on the basis of some of the sites being larger. And the knock-on effect of that is there's some short and medium and longer term issues around contractor insolvency and how robust contractors are in the current market with all the challenges, supply chain issues, increased build costs going forward. And then specifically, for developing RPs, if there's more cuts in jobs, we get less rent, which results in more arrears, us needing to provide more support services and our money needing to go a lot further. So that's obviously the negative element, but I think it is important to focus on our role in building back better as well, and that is a really positive story, I think. So the long term is looking fairly positive. The way in which we work, we appraise over a 40-year period anyway. So we've factored in lots of uncertainty. We may have 2 recessions within that period. And then, we've got a really diverse offer, which means there's a real flexibility with our tenures and the products we're able to deliver. And we're able to kind of flex that and adapt to changing market needs as and when they happen. So, if the housing market fails, then our shared ownership or outright sale can convert to other products, and likewise in the other direction. I think, our approach is generally very intelligence driven as well. We've got a lot of information and we understand the communities we're building in, and we know what they need and what the general, the big areas of demand and the big gaps in the market are. We're able to think strategically because of that longer term view of the world. And then collaboration is key, really. So our strategic partnerships with Homes England, partnerships with combined authority, local authorities, they are all really important. And I think, more crucially going forward, there's a big opportunity for the public and private sector to work together more collaboratively and de-risk some of the sites that could be brought forward that have otherwise been seen as sales sites. And then I think, the quality of our offer has always been high. So it's not like we need to start adapting what we're building to meet, consumer demands. We've always been very driven by standards anyway. And all of this makes us really resilient to change and challenge, but with the caveat that we are heavily dependent on government funding, really, and it's not without its challenges going forward. So just looking specifically on how it will impact on what we deliver. And there's lots of kind of interdependencies with this. So in terms of our core product, the need and demand for affordable rent will grow, fueled by a downturn in sales markets and then the financial impact of a pandemic, ultimately job losses, things we haven't quite felt to the extent they will be felt yet because of furlough, but lots of, impacts there that will ultimately mean people are unable to buy properties and need affordable rent more than ever. So, the onus is on us to deliver more. But as said previously, that's about balancing against potentially less rental income, arrears, and, other pressures on the business plan that I'll touch on further. And then shared ownership, obviously, just talking about the market in general, demand is really healthy. Sales, we're seeing a really buoyant market there. That's totally reflected within our sales shared ownership program. We've had the best quarter, since we've started developing shared ownership, and we're not seeing any market downturns. Obviously, we're mindful that that may not last and we may see changes going forward. But again, I think it's about how adaptable we are to them changes. And at the moment, we're doing lots of work about emerging markets and trends and trying to understand the longer term impacts of that. So, will our customer profile change? Will our key customer be someone who would have previously bought for outright sale, but their aspirations are still the same, but their ability to purchase is not? So, our current kind of profile of customer is a 37-year-old who earns $26,000 a year, purchases 35% at 58k. So what does that become going forward? Is there a bigger role for, shared ownership for older people within the programme, and how will that change? And then I think, demand, and I'll touch on this further on again, but demand is very much around larger properties with gardens and, quality spaces. And I think, never more so than ever now, where you live and what you live in has become so important. And I think people are seeing shared ownership as a long-term commitment, whereas previously they've seen it as a stepping stone to get on the housing ladder. So it's more about, what a lifetime home that they're looking for rather than a kind of starter home. And then, these other impacts that we'll have to absorb in terms of, we could see lots of lower first tranche sales. And I think we are already starting to see this now. And it's not that people can't afford more, but there's more focus on savings and a kind of plan B, which means they're wanting to put less equity into the property side of things. And then lastly, just in terms of specialist accommodation, there's a real opportunity to rethink the principles for the accommodation for older people. 20% less take up on supported housing at the moment, and sheltered housing has become a bit of a dirty word. But, with an ageing demographic, and certainly within our kind of tenant profile, we really need to address it and make sure we're using it as a catalyst to change how we do things rather than a barrier. And then obviously, big focus on move on funding at the moment and accommodation for homelessness. And I guess, all the other kinds of accommodation types that have been desperately in need for years are really coming to the surface now. Things like accommodation for care leavers, people with mental health issues, adults with learning disabilities. There's a much greater focus on that qualitative offer. So, this was kind of a big topic in the panel discussion and Louise's presentation earlier. But as I say, what we live in and where we live and what we live in has become much more important. And I think, what was a real kind of eye-opener within the the pandemic and certainly the lockdown period is what you lived in had a direct impact on your quality of life. So if you were living in a nice environment where you that 1 mile radius that you could walk out to for half an hour a day was parks and tree-lined streets and everything, that was a totally different experience to if you were living in a kind of crash pad in a city centre with all the things you've moved into the city centre for closed. So I think, you know, looking back through history, housing reform is always kind of linked to either a major event or a pandemic of some sort. So the Garden Cities movement and all the principles we're starting to talk about now, you know, was born out of World War I and Homes for Heroes, and the kind of the ethos that, you know, the masses deserve better than what they had, and why should their experience of life be different based on class? And I think that diagram, the Garden City diagram, is really interesting because you have got that kind of central park and then that kind of space between, and that really strong housing grid and all the spaces link, and it's all it you know, it resonates with a lot of what we're talking about now. It's focused on green space, public realm, and, you know, the fundamental of them to the Garden City movement was the focus on the social elements as well. So as Louise touched on earlier in the panel, it's about education, jobs and culture. It's all of that. It's about building houses. It's the elements of that create communities. And I think, you know, again, lots of discussion about innovative green design, but that has really come to the forefront of the housing agenda at the moment. You know, within our existing assets, we are, you know, looking at how we do that, and then more so with green space, with new build and creating new development. These are big opportunity to incorporate that within the infrastructure of what we're building. And I think, as Lisa said earlier, that's a big cultural shift. It's not just about taking away car parking, it's creating an environment that people use in a different way. So I think that's a really kind of new interest and new phase of development that we're going into. And ultimately, you know, good homes raise aspirations, and, you know, the linkages with deprivation and poverty, and, you know, the indices of deprivation is really telling around what a good home does for communities and people. So it would be remiss, I guess, to talk about the placemaking elements without touching on the city and town centre offer. And obviously, you know, Torus, you've seen a few of the slides on our developments. We've got a number of big schemes just on the edge of centre or, you know, within close proximity to. I think, you know, this is the town centre issue is massive, really, and we really need to rethink, you know, what that looks like. But I think, you know, going forward, we have changed, and there's going to be a different approach to work, and there will be lots more homemade working and everything else. That doesn't necessarily mean the town centre's dead, but it means we might use them in a different way, and there'll be a much more diverse range of uses within them. You know, we're talking to councils about, you know, inclusion of youth zones and other kinds of key catalysts to them centres now, and we may see a different kind of residential offer where that's mainly being focused around, you know, a kind of younger investment-led model. It may be more home ownership and converting more to a kind of European model of thinking about things. And, you know, there's just some images there of Copenhagen and, you know, other European cities where they've kind of embraced that change, and they've, you know, totally kind of, and this was, some of these images are post-lockdown, and, you know, they're really kind of, yeah, seeing it in a totally different way. So I think the impact on local economies is really important as well. And I think, you know, what we are experiencing is a bit of a renaissance of the local centre. So while we're not working in local centres and we're working from home, the high streets, which have been a massive issue for the government and local councils forever, are seeing, you know, some investment and a bit more spend, which is having a real difference. And as I say, that's a bit more of a balanced approach to where money is spent and where that regeneration is taking place. But I think ultimately, you know, there will be a different expectation for the standards of the residential offer within a city centre location, and some of the kind of investor-led stuff will be much more focused around, you know, your living space, and your access to open public space and your own amenity area, whether that's by a balcony or a shared communal space or whatever that is. You know, luckily Torus already embeds a lot of them principles within what we are developing within them town centre locations and city centres. And then design, and again, you know, we touched on this earlier, what you live in has become a very important factor. We've spent 24 hours a day in the home, you know, at periods over the last few months. I think this diagram was taken from some research that Savills undertaken in terms of what home buyers were looking for pre-COVID and post-COVID. And it's not surprising, you know, that the focus has become less about the aesthetics of a property and more about its layout and how it's set up, where it is, and you know, some of them issues we talked about earlier, Wi-Fi and specification has become really important, and we are seeing, you know, we're trying to incorporate some of them lessons within our new designs. So looking at trialing some kinds of live-work units with an office space on the ground floor that is designed specifically for, you know, that home office rather than trying to make it work in your back kitchen or whatever else. Green space and balconies, private amenity space has become fundamental. And I think the kinds of functionality of green spaces and the public realm has become important as well. You know, you've used that. We all spoke to our neighbours while we were doing our half an hour walk a day. You know, it created it wasn't just about seeing roads as, you know, a space to drive on. It was, you know, using them in a totally different way. And then obviously all working at home, running costs become much more relevant. You know, lots of fleeces in the background of Teams calls and everything else. And then I just put that little photograph. I've seen lots of these like expectation versus reality things. And this photograph I just had to take, it probably summarises my experience of lockdown, to be honest. So I've got my laptop there and, you know, it all looks dead kind of calm. Above eye level, you know, I'm on team meetings, and then to the side of me, I've got absolute chaos with toys, dogs, kids, background noise. And I think that's probably similar to what we've all been balancing over the last few months. So just some final thoughts, you know, really positive in terms of where the markets are at the moment, sales and shared ownership, you know, lots of demand. We haven't seen the downturn we expected, but obviously that has been masked slightly by furlough and government support schemes. I think the role of housing is absolutely key to economic recovery, but it's as part of that broader placemaking agenda. It's not in silo, it's about creating places and creating communities and building on existing communities rather than just the house itself. I think the role of RPs in recovery has become really important, and we're really resilient, and you know, our offer is diverse enough to face the challenges ahead, but we do need buy-in from the government, and long-term funding is really key to that. You know, there's been a big gap in funding programmes at the moment, and that's had a massive impact on RP's ability to deliver and commit, you know, when basically, you know, we're in a period where we really need that economic stimulus. And then, you know, lots of changes. That's not to say it's all easy for us. There's lots of changes ahead and lots of challenging. So everything's radical at the moment. No one's saying, oh, let's make, you know, slight tweaks to how we work. Let's rethink this element. It's all radical planning reforms, radically changing the way we look at carbon zero. Everything's, you know, kind of coming to the forefront at once, really. And on top of that, you know, we are having some kind of challenges with New Homes England funding obligations. So as a strategic partner, delivering 25% MMC, and then other products have been introduced, which are very difficult to appraise and have impacts on the business plan. So right to shared ownership is a big one for us. And then I guess, you know, longer term impacts to RPs is we do have to stress test our business plan and assume that there will be, you know, economic impacts of all of this in the longer term, and it will mean less income at a time when we're really needing to do more. The demand for our products will be greater, But not only that, across the business, the need for us to support our communities will become greater as well. We committed to a £12 million investment foundation just last week, and that is, totally born out of COVID and the need to do a lot more and provide a lot more support to people. And I think, our existing business plan, because we are a large landlord and we have a lot of existing stock, we also need to make the investments within our existing stock. And there's lots of, changes and standards that need to be increased to contribute towards that green agenda and achieving carbon zero. And that long-term view of the world means we're factoring in that now. And that, the spend associated with that and the level of investment is significant. Doesn't equate to extra income. So these challenges in other areas, but I think we are perfectly placed to drive some of these radical reforms to new housing development and be at the forefront of creating them sustainable communities and places. And lastly, working together makes us stronger, and collaboration is key to economic recovery, working with the public sector, working with the private sector, and just making sure we're all kind of doing our bit in the way we do it best. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks very much, Kate. Really honest and thoughtful look at the role of registered providers in the housing market today. Thank you for sharing. Lots of food for thought, and we've already had some questions coming in. And enjoyed the very frank sharing of the home scene as well. A lot of people can empathise with that. If I can just ask our other panellists to turn their cameras on, we'll get underway with the second panel. So I'll just go once around the room, as it were, and if you just say your name and who you are and where you're from, and then we'll get underway. I'll start with you, Anita.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Leach and I'm from Wirral Borough Council. I have the responsibility for economy, regeneration and development, and including the local plan. The local plan's got a robust, diverse regeneration plans to it, at its heart. We're also trying to address inequality, climate and environmental issues, and working in collaboration with partners, Muse, Peel, Client Authority, RPs, Homes England and MHCLG.
Okay, thank you. And Dale?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dale Milburn. I'm the Executive Director for Regeneration and Economic Development at Knowsley Council, and I also fulfil the role as one of the City Region's Growth Directors.
Thanks, Dale. And Adam?
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Adam Morgan of Studio RBA, a young architectural practice. I'm the Architectural Director. Started my career in 2008 at BDP, so I'm quite familiar in design during a crisis. And yeah, we've got many projects. We've been going 4 years. We've had over 200 projects in that time, and we've just actually started to decant into our new office in the Albert Dock. I don't know. We'll soon see whether that's a good decision or not.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. And Adam, is this an area that you work in terms of affordable housing, and just reflecting on Kate's presentation there?
Yeah. We've actually seen a trend in more affordable housing in terms of our inquiries in our studio. And just picking up on something that Kate said as well, I made a note as she was talking about the way she mentioned that expectations have changed. I thought that was a great point. And that's something that we've seen. When we're getting inquiries now, it isn't just about how many units you can get on a site. It is about how can we create a new community and things like that. And affordable used to mean cheap and nasty, really. And what now it actually truly means, affordable, but still with a quality aspect to it. I like the way Kate mentioned about the green spaces, like the garden cities and stuff. We are seeing that trend as well in terms of our inquiries. It's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Anita, you mentioned about responsibility for local plan. Can you, taking that and the broader sort of regeneration and growth brief that you have, tell us about some of the priorities that you've got on your desk at the moment.
So I don't know where to start really with this. We've got so much going on. From creation of a new museum at Eureka Museum, and we've got the town centre renewal, we've got Liscard town centre renewal, New Brighton town centre renewal, and New Ferry. Birkenhead town centre is a massive project for us that's regenerating the whole of Birkenhead really, from New Ferry right through to New Brighton. And that's just a few of them. And with other partnerships, we've got redevelopment in Morton Town Centre. As we were talking about before, that's sort of like we've got shopping facilities, we've got extra care facilities and homes, you know, and just touching on what everyone else has said, you know, we've done that much consultation with residents of late, with doing the local plan, with doing all the town centre renewals, that we've actually heard exactly what Kate and Adam have been saying about the need for green spaces, the need for good public realm, etc. So yes, so that's all at the heart of what we're trying to do and achieve.
That's great to hear. And Dale, similarly, what are some of the priorities for those that want to understand what's going on in Knowsley?
Fairly similar in a sense to Anita over on the Wirral there. So we're slightly further advanced, and obviously we've been through the local plan, and we're probably 4 years into that delivery now. But a lot of focus on new housing development. Interested, you know, certainly from Kate's presentation, the sort of garden city. Obviously, we have the only garden village in the city region in Holsmead, and the green infrastructure is key to that. And actually it's something that we're seeking to adopt right across any of our developments now, the importance of that green infrastructure. So it shouldn't just be for garden villages or garden cities, it should be at the centre of everything. Large focus on our town centres. We've got regeneration plans for all three, all slightly different. Kirby's retail-led, Highton will be the sort of civic and office-stroke residential focus for Highton Town Centre, which is just in its early stages at the moment. And then obviously Prescott is more around the historical or the development of the Shakespeare North Theatre. And then equally from an employment perspective, obviously we're the largest employment park in the city region, so a lot of interest there around.
And what are you hearing in terms of inquiries at Kirby, given retail is in such turmoil at the moment?
Yeah, it's you know, who would buy a town centre just as a pandemic hits and retail takes a knock? But no, I think what we're finding with, you know, the development there is it's anchored by obviously a 45,000 square foot Morrison's store. There's a further 80,000 square foot of retail alongside that being developed. And overall, I think at the moment we're probably about 77% pre-let. So the steel work is only just going up. So, but, you know, the inquiries are there, and certainly, you know, I think again Kate touched on it. I think in her presentation, I think we will see a move back to more emphasis being placed on the local centres to support residents, moving away from the perhaps the bigger city offer, especially if people end up more working from home and the local attraction.
Absolutely. And Adam, in terms of you know, seeing the sort of pipeline of things come through, talk us through what your lockdown's been like, and the order book and your outlook.
The number of inquiries has reduced, I must admit. What I would say is our hit rate has gone up, so the number of inquiries has reduced, but the developers that are approaching us are much more serious. So it feels a bit more thought through. So if anything, I would say that made us more productive. We heard a lot about productivity going up with the reduction in diary entries. That helped a little bit. But it was our project focus, if you like, was more specific to, say, a handful of opportunities rather than 10 or 15. We were seeing something like 10 or 15 every couple of weeks, and it was probably a 5% hit rate, whereas that number's reduced. But we're near enough 100% hit rate now. Every inquiry that's coming in seems to be very serious. So yeah, it's almost like the tire kickers have gone away as a result.
Yeah, and is there a particular profile or pattern of the types of things that you're seeing come through in terms of uses or?
Well, mixed use, but proper mixed use. So I think gone are the times of the apologetic kind of bit of commercial at the bottom of, say, an apartment scheme or something like that, or again, an apologetic open space in a housing scheme. We're seeing that, yeah. Again, going back to that expectations. I still think a lot of them will be residential led, but a mixture of uses, and a big driver that we're seeing as well is creating a sense of community. So we've actually got a project at the minute. I can't say too much, but it's a waterfront project, and the developers really pushing that idea of bringing in independent businesses, maybe a small scale kind of supermarket, office spaces, office space obviously within the residential units as well. Promoting that idea that you can properly walk to work, you can properly use communal spaces. So yeah, we're actually seeing a really good trend.
Yeah. And Kate, just picking up on your position, for those that are in the audience and watching that maybe are from other developers or work with other developers, do you work with developers on projects? Are there opportunities to get involved, or is it purely sort of your own delivery?
Yeah, no, totally. So I think, our programme is broadly 1,200 units a year. We do look at quite big land-led schemes, and as I said, that's about impact, and that's about, our heartlands and our core growth areas, making sure we've got the control to create the right product and the right linkages with assets and everything else, and other uses there. As Dale said, it's about the linkages with the town centres as well. It's not just, developing in isolation, but I think, our programme will always have to be a mix of kind of developer-led stuff as well. In terms of, we work with house builders on Section 106. We work with developers, who are kind of, working within our heartlands and other areas. Yeah. And we do a lot of land-led stuff ourselves. Okay.
And it used to be seen as a sort of easy exit for some developers to, to sell the affordable element. Is there still that part of the game?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we've had, lots of discussions recently, and I think especially because we're a strategic partner, so we've got the long-term funding in place from Homes England already. So our funding goes to 2025 at the moment, and we're just looking at bidding for an extension that would take us to 2029. So on quite significant development sites, which will be developed over a longer period, we are getting more kinds of people coming to us to say, would you be interested in taking more affordable, or would you be interested in taking part of the site rather than just, we'll give you the Section 106 units at the end. I think, one big shift I'd like to see is obviously all the things we're talking about, placemaking and, kind of green focused design. It all costs money, and it all, ultimately affects the land value and land capacity. And I think, that for us really to make them impacts and change the way we are working, we will have to see that shift in the market, whereby, land is less kind of competition for land maybe, or we're more competitive for land, and we can do, kind of embed them principles into our designs.
Yeah. And Anita, there's a question here from the audience about hearing mixed messages from members at Wirral and the Planning Authority over the need to release greenbelt land in the local plan. Didn't take long for this to come up. Do these mixed messages undermine the delivery of the local plan?
I think probably when people are talking about the green belt and the mixed messages, I think that mixed messages from a couple of years back. I don't think there's so much of a mixed message now. We have clearly stated as the council that we will be looking for an urban regeneration brownfield first approach to the local plan. We've identified a huge amount of brownfield sites. As Kate was saying, we need obviously government help and involvement to generate the houses there. But, you know, we've got huge ambition to build on brownfield sites. We've got the Left Bank project, which is sort of like linking Wirral waters to the town centres, Grade A office accommodation there as well. And obviously creating jobs in a sustainable future. Okay.
And Dale, we've heard already today about the thriving industrial sector. Obviously, you've got Knowsley Industrial Estates, one of the biggest in the region. Have you got enough land there to satisfy all the demand, or is that something that you're looking to increase?
If you're asking me if we're opening up our local plan anytime soon, I think the answer to that one is no. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, having gone through that local plan process, then we have allocated land that meets our need for the foreseeable future. So we are seeing quite a lot of, you know, again, the history to Knowsley Business Park is that it was the Royal Ordnance Factory during the Second World War. So there is quite a lot of tired product on that park. So we are seeing a number of sites being sort of regenerated, old buildings cleared and brought forward in that sense. So I think certainly for the time being, we're not seeing any shortage from an employment perspective. Equally, as part of the Garden Village, and again, Kate mentioned it, you know, it's not just about housing. So that the Garden Village at Holmesmead there's an employment park associated with that on the southern side of the motorway. So again, I think at the moment there is plenty of employment space to go at. And I think that the other thing for all of the local authorities in a sense that, you know, we have to work on a city region footprint. Yes, it would be great if all the investment came into our individual boroughs, but ultimately, you know, if Lisa's building something in St Helens, for argument's sake, then my residents in Knowsley are going to be equally able to access those jobs there. So I think it is a look across the patch rather than just looking at individual boroughs.
Yeah, and taking, you know, both hats with the city region perspective and also your own authority boundary. And we hear a lot about resources at the moment, and obviously, you know, we've had years of austerity and now there's extra pressures for all sorts of services at the moment. And are there the resources within planning, economic development and the associated departments to handle some of these ambitious sort of items that are on the agenda at the moment?
It's a challenge, and not necessarily because of resources, ironically. It's well, not necessarily in terms of financial resources, should I say. I think it's actually the human resources aspect of it and getting the skill sets in place that we need to support those. I know, you know, we are carrying some vacancies ourselves in those. So there are some recruitment challenges for us around that to be able to support those initiatives. But I think as a local authority, we were quite fortunate. We did probably 3-4 years ago resource up in anticipation that you know, the growth would be coming. We developed a number of pipeline projects so that when funding came on, that they were ready to go, and they're the ones that we're now seeing in delivery. So we did resource up at that time to sort of meet it. But that's not to say it is not a, you know, it's not plain sailing. Any of the developers you speak to, you know, undoubtedly they will always say the planning system doesn't go quick enough for them. But it is just about trying to smooth that process.
Yeah. And Kate, similarly, in the areas that you work in and in your heartlands, are you coming up against sort of resource issue, whether it's HR or finance, in terms of that interface with the public sector?
Yeah, you know, I think there's massive pressures on local authorities at the moment, and you know, regeneration and everything else is at the forefront, but COVID has really kind of added an additional kind of reaction pressure as well. And we are, there's key projects that have been affected by just, as Dale said, human resource, the ability to actually have the capacity in councils and to deal with things and to deal with them in the right way. I think, that we've worked really closely with the combined authority across the city region on a few big projects lately, and that, I can see that making a big difference in terms of, providing some of that capacity funding to local authorities and supporting with some of the skills they need to see these things through. And it's, it's a difficult journey, isn't it? Because these big aspirations, but you're starting from scratch and it takes time to see results. But I think, all the councils we're speaking to are really kind of driving their own agendas forward in very challenging times.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had a couple of questions about the sort of changing design around housing, which you touched on a little bit of, extra room for home offices. People have mentioned home learning. Are you looking at other solutions to that in terms of dividing rooms or flexibility in typologies?
Yeah, so I think, there's a number of elements to the design, isn't there? So I think we're looking at kind of a few new development opportunities that lend themselves to look at a different layout across the site. So we're looking at, a green space with some units that kind of enclose it. And we're looking at them as having the potential to provide that, say, that extended offer as a kind of, so you've got the green space and then you've got an office on the ground floor overlooking the park, taking the, the cars off the street. So it's not kind of, taking over the streetscape. And then, internally we're doing just lots of kind of market testing. We have access to lots of big customer base because of our shared ownership program, and we're just testing some of them ideas now and seeing what people are focusing on being more important to them. I think internal space has become a massive one, and even just as you say, the subdividing or having a space that everyone seems to have moved away from wanting the box room to be the office, and you sat in there all day. You want a big, nice, bright space where you're looking out onto the garden and things like that. So there's an element of subdividing because of noise, children, and everything. But I think people are wanting to actually work in a nicer space as well. It's not just the practicalities of having a space.
Sure. Adam, do you want to add to that from a designer's perspective?
Yeah, spot on. What Kate was saying about a nicer space, we're seeing our clients acknowledge the principle of well-being as well when we're designing dwellings. More natural light, more space, even things like higher ceilings. We've got a project in Prenton, and at first we were almost laughed at by the contractor for proposing 2.7 metre ceilings, for ground, first floor, and what have you. And then when they were completed, and we've done a bit of a final kind of handover walk, absolutely everyone on the team, as soon as you walked in, you could not feel that difference. And so it's nice really, because we're seeing that trend, and it's almost the architect's wacky ideas are starting to land a little bit better now. It's nice.
Yeah, and on the planning side, how are you finding working with officers on some of these new concepts?
As in with planners?
Yeah.
Well, it's something that planners have been pushing again for a while. Really, it's more a willingness from a developer's end that I think's been the biggest change. And obviously there was a topic about touch on human resource and what have you. What we've seen, which is quite nice, is the idea of workshops. So with Liverpool Council particularly, the use of Zoom has enabled us to do more informal pre-app sessions. Which has been great, really, and I'd encourage everyone to do that, really, where instead of that kind of one formal pre-app meeting and it was a bit of a yes or a no kind of thing, we've been working up schemes with local authorities, because it's a bit easier, isn't it, to just get round a virtual meeting. So yeah, we've seen a decent trend there.
Yeah, and Anita, given the crazy year that we've had, do you anticipate any delays to any of the plans, or have you managed to keep things on track?
Fairly much on track. We've got a whole pipeline of things coming forward during 2021. There have been some slight delays over things through COVID, but we're certainly on track with a whole pipeline of development for 2021.
Yeah, great. And a question across the panel about sort of margins, land values, increasing development costs. There's been all sorts of delays. We've all probably got anecdotes about a bag of plaster going from £7 to 70 and things like that. Is that having an impact on the viability of schemes, and how does that work through? And anybody want to have a first stab at that? Yeah,
Paul, I think that was kind of the point I was inarticulately trying to get to earlier, to be honest, in terms of, it is going to cost more to do things in the right way. I was heartened that Adam mentioned about developers being more focused on that now, because ultimately, the market and demand sets land values, and that often forces the wrong product to be built on a site. And, it's all about increasing capacity and everything else, which then creates a value for that is, aspirational, but also makes the right product undeliverable. So I think we really need to see that shift where it's a broader buy-in from the sector as a whole to do the right thing and incorporate some of these really important principles in what they're doing. And that will ultimately be driven by demand and expectation of the consumer, which will then ultimately see, an impact on land values somewhere down the line, because we'll build less on sites, which, will be less viable.
Yeah. And Dale, similarly, are you finding noises changing from the advisors, from the developers that are looking around some of your town centres like Prescott and Highton and Kirby in terms of that viability, how things stack up?
I think from a residential perspective, viability is a bit of a game to a certain extent. Obviously, it's based on assumed costs and values, and there's means and ways of navigating your way through a viability process. It's a balancing act, as Kate says. There's the expectations of landowners and things in terms of the value they're going to get out of it. Balancing that with the cost of the quality that we expect as a local authority in terms of the actual development itself. I think one of the challenges we're finding is where that gets squeezed is on the affordable housing side of things, and politically with our members, that's not a space they want to go to really. Affordable homes for local residents is key. And again, an interesting point I picked up from Kate's presentation there, that that Torus are keen to do larger 4-bedroom rather than 2-bedroom affordable houses, which is again music to our ears, because again, historically you would have been able to probably spot the affordable units on any developments. We want that tenure blind in a sense now, and we want our local residents to be able to access the larger 4-bedroom houses rather than all the affordables are sort of the 2 beds. But yeah, I think that I can see something coming where there will be some form of pushback around viability, because as I said, the affordable sector is getting squeezed. We are, I'd encourage all the developers in a sense to work with the RPs, because there is a solution there that hopefully benefits everybody in that sense, as opposed to just looking purely at private sale, because it certainly is an issue that is probably going to manifest itself even more so over the next couple of years as we come out of the pandemic and the economic crisis that we've been in. So yeah, there's challenges definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And all eyes on the autumn statement and other measures coming from government through various bodies. And Anita, just give us is there any sort of flavour of what we can expect in those town centres as those plans are being worked up with people that have maybe got an eye on New Brighton or New Ferry, Liskeard?
Yeah, I'll start with New Ferry. That's out for consultation at the moment. Sorry, with New Brighton, that's out for consultation at the moment, and we're talking about bringing back the open door swimming. With some people, some Lido, I never know which one to say. So you know that's an ambition there to do that. In New Ferry, we had the bomb blast there, and there's scope for housing and you know regenerating the whole area, and through Birkenhead we're talking about the Grade A offices, and hoping that we will be able to decant from up to 14 of the older offices at the council into this new office block. And obviously we are a market town, and we're looking to have a new market in that area as well. And you know, as I said before, connectivity in Birkenhead is really, really great, and to sort of like have that link from the waterfront through to the town centre will really help with the viability of that. We're also looking at some like modular products as well, and not something that we've been that keen on in Wirral in the past is more apartments. We've got a requirement for 1 and 2 bedroom places within Wirral, as well as the 4 bed. Have seemed to have a glut of 3 bedroom properties, but the 1 and 2 bed maybe apartments and you know 4 beds is certainly something that we'll be looking at.
That's brilliant. Look forward to that coming through in the months and years ahead. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Please give a virtual round of applause at home to our panellists. Covered some good ground there. I hope that was useful and entertaining wherever you're watching. Thanks again to our sponsors today, to Lexington Communications, to Pegasus, to Torus, to Curtains and Rendell and Rittner. Please do stay around. We've got the networking room open for another half an hour. You pop your cameras on and have a little wander around the tables in there. And yes, we still have another couple of events before the end of the year. Next Tuesday, 17th, we've got transport and infrastructure event. And then 26th of November, there's the Cheshire development update. So a neighbouring patch there that will be familiar to a lot of you. So hope to see you there. Thanks again. I'll see you in the other room.